Good morning, guys. I hope that you're doing fine. Today we're going to learn about modals of necessity, prohibitions, and preference. We're going to jump over the topics of Unit 22 of the book Grammar and Beyond. So right now, without further ado, let me go over the explanation in the easiest and more simpler way that I can do it so you can understand it freely. So if you have any questions, remember that you have the Google Classroom platform to post your questions over there, and I will gladly answer them no matter what kind of questions you have. Let's jump into the topic. First, we are going to talk about the following. That is modals of necessity and prohibition. For modals of necessity and prohibition, we have the following. The first one is have to, have got to, need to, and must not, that are used to say what's necessary, not necessary, or prohibited. They are different in the way that we're going to use them. We're going to see that in a second when we see the uses of the structure. But something that I want you to notice is the following. We're going to see some examples to start understanding. We have the first one, an ad has to appeal to consumers. What's an ad? It's a TV advertisement that you see on TV, redundancy, when you want to see a product that wants to be sold to a certain type of people, right? When they want to sell a car, they show you the car and how beautiful and how great and magnificent it is. But it's necessary. Something that I want you to focus over here. It's a necessity. So that means that over here, if an ad wants to be successful, it has to appeal to whom? To the consumers. They do not need to advertise abroad. Not necessary. Do not need. So that means that when we use do not need, we're talking about things that are not necessary, or in other sense of the word, something that is not essential to do so. Like for example, if I tell you, teacher, do I need to bring a pencil for the test? And I can say, you don't need it, okay? Because you're not going to write anything. You're just going to highlight the right answer. Not necessary. You're giving the option. Companies must follow the rules when they create ads. This is necessary, but as well is an obligation. It's something that they must follow, because if they don't, they will get into trouble. Like for example, if we are in the class, that hopefully we will be in the classroom soon, you can say you must not speak in Spanish, or you must speak in English. An obligation, a necessity. And then we have you must not lie in the advertising. Something that I want you to notice as instead, this is prohibited. So that means that it's not allowed. Every time that you see the word must not in any way, that means that it is a prohibition, something that is either against the law or is not allowed at all. First, we're going to focus on the structure to make statements. What's statement? Something that you say that it is true and you want to support that opinion. It can be a negative statement that is an affirmative sentence. Sorry, a negative statement that is a negative sentence, or an affirmative statement that is an affirmative sentence. We have the subject, and then we have, notice, the modal verb, need to, have got to, or have to. So we have I have to, or I do not have to. Something that I want you to take a look over here is that when we're using the negative form in have to, we're going to have do not at the beginning, okay? Then we're going to include the base form of the verb. As you remember, the base form is the verb without any changes, without s, without ing, without ed, without any of that stuff. And then we're going to include the complement. Any complement you want. For example, this sentence says, I have to be clever. That's a necessity. That's something that I need to be if I want to be successful in life. You need to know how to be clever, or you need to be clever as a student as well. Let's take a look at some examples. I have to buy. Instead, in this case, it says advertising, but that doesn't fit so much. But let's change it. Like for example, I have to buy milk because I don't have any more milk and it's a necessity. Or I have to buy medicine. I have to buy chicken or whatever else I need to eat during the week. I have got to, and I need to, or I do not need to. We're going to use these modal verbs in this form with these subjects, you, we, they, and I. I want you to notice that have got to doesn't have a negative form. We're going to see that when we see the uses, but there is a reason for that. When we use the third person singular, that is he, she, or it, the modal verb is going to change, and we're going to use has to, or doesn't have to, has got to, or needs to or doesn't need to. And we follow the same pattern that we follow on the last one. For mixed statements with must, we have to use the following structure. First, we're going to have the subject, the modal verb, the base form, and the complement. Pretty much the same. I must be clever. That's an obligation that I have. I must buy advertising, or I must stay home to stay safe. Or I must not go out unless I need it. Or I mustn't if you want to. Notice that in this case, it doesn't matter if you have the third person singular, you are not going to change anything in the modal verb. It stays the same. Then let's move on to the yes/no questions that are questions that you can answer with a simple yes or no. Over here, I want you to notice that the structure is really simple. We're going to have do or does depending on the subject that we have, any subject, have to or need to, and the base form of the verb. Always remember this. When you're using have to or need to, you always will use the base form of the verb. We have the auxiliary over here. Do you have to advertise? Let's change that example for another one. Let's say like, do you have to complete the lesson? Do you have to complete the workbook? You can tell me yes or no. Or do you need to pay attention in class? Of course you do. Of course you have to pay attention. Does he or she need to come to the party? No, she doesn't need it. It's not an obligation. It's just because she wants to. Notice that since we're using the third person singular, as well the auxiliary changes. Instead of do, we're going to use does. Then we're going to move on to the information questions that are questions that you ask when you want to know extra information besides just yes or no. By looking at these two structures, can you notice any difference? I will give you 2 to 3 seconds to think and tell me, is there any difference? Well, if your answer is no, let me tell you what's the difference. This structure has two more things than the ones below. We have the auxiliary and we have the subject. As in the other one, we just have three things, three elements as compared to the other one that are in common. Let's move to the first one that says, double H word, when do you have to come to classes? When do you have to come to classes? You want to know exactly the time when the person is going to get there. You see? Double H word, do or does, depending on the subject. The subject have to or need to in the base form of the verb. When do you need to give the homework assignment? When the due line says so. Why do you need to pay attention? Because you're going to learn. Or where do I need to go to classes? Well, to your classroom as well. Does and she. You see over here, what I was telling you is that with the third person, we add does. Then let's focus on the structure below that, as I tell you, has less element, but there is a reason for that because we're going to use the word who. Who then has to advertise. Why don't we have a subject over here? Because the mission and the objective of this question is to guess who's the person you're referring to. Who has to advertise? Over here, we don't need a subject for that reason. Who needs to advertise? Let's say I need to advertise. You need to advertise. My students need to advertise. Now that we have seen how the structure is made, let's look at the examples and the uses. First, we have the first use, that is letter A. The first example says, use have to and need to say something is necessary. Have to is twice as common as need to. That means that people, I want you to take a look at this, people normally will use have to more commonly when they are speaking than when they are writing. Like for example, you say, I have to go to the dentist. I have to finish my homework. I have to pay attention. That's something that I need to do. Advertisers have to think about consumers. The company needs to be more creative. That's a necessity that they have. Notice over here, modal verb, base form of the verb. That is a common necessity that both things have. You can say, I have to go to the doctor. That's a necessity. I have to watch TV. That's not a necessity, right? That's something that we do for pleasure. Letter B. You can use have got to in affirmative statements, but it's usually less formal, and the contraction for it is the S contracted. So have got to is less formal. That means that if it is something is less formal, we're going to use it in the oral form only. The ad has got to appeal to a lot of people. It's got to be entertaining. So you see that here we have the contraction that it pronounced is got to. It's got to be interesting. Has got to appeal to people. Okay? Something that I want you to remember is that it's less formal, so that means that in written form we are never going to use it. We're going to use have to or need to. Have got to is not usually used in a negative form. What I told you the last time is that we are not going to use that for negative forms. That's why in the structure you didn't have it. The ad hasn't got to appeal to children. You just noted this. Just listen to this. Doesn't sound natural, doesn't sound appealing. That's why we don't use the negative form. The ad hasn't got to appeal to children. Must is very strong and sounds formal or official. It is often used in writing to state rules or laws, and it is rare in speaking. Normally people don't say, I must not come late. No, they say I cannot go late. Because must is too strong, it sounds too rude, it sounds too official. But when we're talking about laws, we're talking about something that is written, then you can use it and no problem. For example, the advertising companies must follow the rules. So for example, an English student must study before the test. An obligation, a rule that you should follow. He must report this immediately, etc., etc. And we can follow with these examples. Like for example, you must pay respect to your parents. Okay, that's a rule, something that you know that you should do. You can use don't have to and don't need to say something that is not necessary. As I mentioned before, something that is not a necessity but an option. For example, she doesn't need to finish that. That means that it's not an obligation, it's something that she can do or she has the option to do. However, we must not or mustn't to express a strong prohibition or forbidden of something. So that means that when you're using must not or mustn't, that means that you're talking about something that is completely prohibited. For example, you must not smoke in the parks. That is prohibited. That's against the law. That's something that you shouldn't be doing. Companies must not lie on their advertisement. That's another example because you cannot say that your hamburger is really beautiful and really full of meat and at the end when you buy it is not similar to that at all. Be careful. Have to and must have a similar meaning in the affirmative, but they are very different in the negative sentences. What do I mean by that? Let's look at some examples and find out. You must use a pen. A pen is necessary. For example, when we're doing an exam, you tell me, teacher, do I have to use a pen? Yes, you must use a pen. It's a necessity. It's something that is essential. You don't have to use a pen. Like for example, if you tell me you're doing a guide for exercises about this kind of structure, and you tell me, teacher, can I leave it in pen? Yeah, in pencil, you don't have to use a pen, no problem. It's not a necessity, you have the choice. And you must not use a pen, it's prohibited. You have no choice. So in this case, I can tell you, in your exam, you must not use a pencil. That's an obligation, it's prohibited to you to do it. The last two uses are use have to and need to ask about necessity, like we see in the examples. Do we have to follow this rule? Or, yes we do. Does this ad need to be finished today? No, it doesn't. So you see that we are using the structure that we saw at the beginning to make questions. The answers, yes we do. No, it doesn't. We often use can't instead of must not to express prohibition, especially in spoken English. This is what I told you. When we're talking about spoken English, we are always going to use can't and not must not. The reason why is too strong, is too formal, and when we're speaking, we can be less formal and more colloquial. Yes, you can do that. It's against the rules. Or, you see, that it's a say. So that means that in the speaking form, I can do it. But in written form, I can say drivers must not exceed the speed limit. Let's move on to the modal verbs of preference. Modal verbs of preference are would rather, would like to, and would prefer that are often used to express preference. We have the examples. I would rather not watch the commercials. I would like to see some new and interesting ads. I prefer to turn the TV off. Notice that all of them are to express the preference. Those commercials, I don't want to watch those commercials, but maybe I want to watch other type of commercials. I would like to see some interesting ads. That means that for me, the ads that are shown on TV are not that interesting, or I prefer to turn off the TV. Maybe because I want to do something else instead. Maybe I want to read a book, listen to the radio, or any other action that doesn't include the TV at all. The structure for the statements is similar to the one that we saw at the beginning. First, we have the subject that is I, would rather, and then we have the base form of the verb, if you remember, verb without any changes. I would rather, for example, take a shower, or I would rather sleep in my bed than in your bed. It won't change no matter the kind of subject that you have, so it will always remain the same. If you're using the negative form, the particle not will go after would rather. Then when we are using would like and would prefer to make statements, we're going to have the subject, we're going to have would like, and the infinitive. This is the difference between would like and would prefer. I mean, would like, would prefer, and would rather. With would like and would prefer, you're going to use an infinitive after the modal verb. With would rather, you're going to just use the base form. You see, I would like to advertise, or I would like to go to the beach. I would like to go and play video games, or I would like to talk to my friends. That's some examples. And I want you to notice that the particle not will be in the middle between would and like. If I use I would prefer, the particle not will be after this, but it will follow the same pattern. I will prefer not to go to the park right now, or I would prefer not to watch TV that late in the night. And all the subjects can be used with this structure. We have the yes/no questions, and you notice the difference. In one we have the infinitive form, and the other one we have the base form of the verb. We have would you like to advertise, or would you prefer to advertise. Over here with like and prefer, or we'll remember that we're going to use the infinitive form of the verb. I would say I would like to eat pizza. I would prefer to swim on a pool. Then we have the next one, would, the subject, rather, and advertise. Notice the base form of the verb will be used with rather. Don't get confused with that. Keep that in mind, that it's important. With the information questions, I want you to notice the difference over here. Here, we're using the infinitive form, and here we're using the base form of the verb. This indicates that the ones that are below are used for rather, and the ones that are above are used for like and prefer. Or in other words, the yellow ones are for like and prefer, and the green ones are for rather. We have examples like what would you like to advertise, or what would you like to do? Question that we always ask to somebody. What would you prefer to watch? For saying something, would you prefer to watch, I don't know, Game of Thrones, or would you prefer to watch Modern Family, or would you prefer to watch The Big Bang Theory, etc. With who, remember, we are not going to use a subject over here. We're going to say who would like to buy this product, who would prefer to come with me to the party, for saying something. Now let's take a look at the ones with rather. What would you rather advertise? Well, what would you rather do? Remember, what would you like to do? What would you rather do? The difference. And who would rather buy this product? Who would rather buy this product? Who would like to buy this product? You see the difference? Base form, infinitive form. Keep that in mind. Remember that with who, in any other cases, we are never going to include this, a subject, in the question. Why? Because that is going to be part of the answer. Let's move on to the uses. We have a couple of them. Then we use would rather, would like, and would prefer to express preference. Would prefer is more formal. We have would rather spend a little time, or a little time with my family, for saying something. Would rather, my preference, what I want to do. I would prefer to listen to the radio, my preference. I don't want to watch TV. I don't want to be watching YouTube. I want to listen to the radio. And finally, use would rather with a base form of the verb. So remember, would rather see an advertising. Remember, base form versus the infinitive. Would like and would prefer with the infinitive, as I was telling you. You see over here, would rather see, would like to see. Totally different structures. The contraction of would is I'd. Like, for example, I'd like to see more advertising. Pronounce it with me at home. I'd like. Without the D will be I like, but with the D is I'd like. In the negative sentence, not goes between would and like. it goes after would prefer and would rather. What I told you at the beginning, I would say, he wouldn't like to work in that advertising company. The not is in the middle. Would prefer not to work in the advertising company. The not is after the modal verb. And would rather not watch all the commercials as well. The not is after the modal verb. The other uses are uses to express the verb prefer without would. So this means that you can use the word prefer instead of using would prefer. Like this one. I would prefer to watch shorter commercials. Instead of saying would prefer, you can use the word prefer. She prefers to watch shorter commercials. But remember that when you're using this structure, prefer has to follow the third person singular rules. So that means that it's going to use s, es, depending on the case. Would prefer and prefer can be followed by a noun, infinitive, or a verb in ing. So that means that I can have examples like this one. I would prefer a TV channel without ads. So that means, what's a TV channel? A noun. What are nouns? Any name that you can think of. Your name is a noun. The name of your pet is a noun. The name of a place is a noun. A park, a building, everything, it's a noun. Then we have, he prefers, or he would prefer to watch TV without commercials. So we have an infinitive because we have the particle to and the base form. He prefers watching TV without commercials. Over here, the ing form of the verb can be used as well. So you can use the three of them without any issue. Use or in questions about preference to offer a choice. The verb or is usually in the base form. So over here we have this example. Would you like to go out or stay home? Something that I want you to notice here, since we're using a fanboy, if you remember, when we learned about fanboys, we said that all the verbs, it has to be grammatically equal. So that means that I cannot have here a verb in ing and a verb in base form over here. I need to have either this one in base form and this one is base form as well, because they have to be equivalent to each other. That's why it says the verb is usually in the base form. Like for example, would you like stay home or to go out? We have would rather go out or stay home. Would you rather go out or stay home? You can use rather not to respond to suggestions or requests. For example, if I ask you, would you like to go to the party? I will say I'd rather not. I'm tired right now. I want to sleep home and I want to stay at home. You can make a comparison with would rather and than if there is a verb after than. For example, I'd rather see the ads than watch them on TV. So you see, I'm comparing the ads on the internet to the ads on the TV. And I say that I prefer the ones on the internet to the ones on the TV. I don't know, maybe they are funnier, maybe they are less long or something like that. So something that I want you to notice over here is that it's like if you are using the comparative form, as we saw many topics before this one, that means that it's really simple to use. Always use then. And with that, we finish the explanation of the topic. I hope that this video is helpful for you and it helps you to solve any of the questions that you have. If you have any question about the structure, you can watch this video as many times as you want to. So it's going to help you out a little bit. As well, you can ask me any questions in the Google Classroom platform. I will gladly answer them. And remember, kids, stay home, stay safe. This is going to end up soon. I hope to see you again in the classroom just in a couple of weeks, because believe me, I don't know if you miss it, but I miss having you in the classroom. But I hope that you're doing well, and I will talk to you until the next video. That means the next class. Take care.